Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting of December 11, 2012. Roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Here.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Here.
Mayor Ruane.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
And I want to thank the Garden Club for the floral arrangement they always provide for us. Hopefully it's in front of me. Pledge of Allegiance. Mark, would you lead us, please?
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, announcements. Irene?
Thank you. I just like people to know that the beautification, it's not going through. Well, there it goes. That the Beautification Task Force will be sponsoring their holiday lights this season, as always. We're in a tight schedule this time, though, so we will be out photographing this weekend, the 15th and 16th. This year, however, if you want to photograph your own outdoor holiday lights or your indoor trees or decorations and would like to send them with a JPEG file to my city email address, we will take those and put them on the holiday light program. So we're looking forward to going around and seeing everyone's holiday lights. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to announce we're going to have a Transit Corridors Plan Open House Workshop, and the Planning Division will host an open house workshop on the Transit Corridors Plan at City Hall on Monday evening, January 7, 2013, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. City staff will be on hand to discuss the Transit Corridors Plan and answer any questions. The public is welcome to come at any time between 6 and 8 p.m. And item number 3, one more announcement. There will not be a City Council meeting the 4th Tuesday of December. The only regular City Council meeting in December will be held on this evening, December 11, 2012. Item number 4, presentations. We're going to receive a presentation from James Porter of the County Department of Public Works on what they are doing to avoid overflows at Cupid Row.
Thank you, Mayor Ruane, members of the council. My name is Jim Porter. I'm the Director of Public Works with San Mateo County. We oversee the San Bruno Flood Control Channel, which is the topic of tonight's presentation. I'm going to talk a bit about the history of the Flood Control District, its revenue sources, and then we'll drill down to Cupid Row and talk about some of the issues that are going on there and some of the challenges we face in maintaining that channel. The San Bruno Flood Control Zone, which this channel is in, was established in 1967. At that time, it was designed to handle what's called a 25-year storm, or something that in theory, statistically, is supposed to occur once every 25 years. Practically, that happens a whole lot lately. The zone itself consists of several segments. One is the Cupid Row segment, which we'll talk about a lot today. Another, and that runs from basically the Caltrain tracks up to San Bruno Avenue. Then there's the North Channel, and that's a section from San Bruno Avenue that runs north of there, underneath 101-380 interchange, and out to the bay. We also have tide gates at the bay where it enters the bay. And then we have 2 pump stations. We call them the Angus Pump Station and the Walnut Pump Station. And they pump water out of the eastern portion of San Bruno into that channel. This is a picture of the zone. You can see it encompasses primarily the city of San Bruno. There is a portion of South San Francisco in this zone. This is a little bit confusing, but what you want to take out of this picture is this is the design for the 25-year storm. The wider channel is what the actual design cross-section was built to in 1968, and what we've been trying to maintain to over those years. So the zone receives funding from a portion of the 1% of property tax. The zone was created prior to Prop 13, and the revenue we receive is a portion of that 1%. It's about $195,000 per year. In the last 10 years, we've spent about $90,000 on maintenance, so that leaves roughly $100,000 a year that we're saving up for capital. And as you'll see, the capital projects are very expensive for this type of work. The last time we did a major dredging project, it was roughly $500,000. And the cost of that is primarily the permitting and the biological work that we do because of the presence of the San Francisco garter snake and the red-legged frog in that channel. We've also looked at upgrading the 2 pump stations, the Angus and the Walnut pump station. For us to upgrade those stations, both of them, we're looking at about $2.5 million. And for us to replace those stations, we're in somewhere of the range of $11 million. So as you can see, the cost of capital versus the revenue is disproportionate. There's a lot more capital needs than we have the dollars for. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a sensitive habitat that we're working in. This entire channel is within what's called the West of Bayshore property that's actually owned by the San Francisco International Airport. The city and county of San Francisco owns that land. Somewhere along the line, we inherited that channel without an easement. So we're hoping to get an easement someday, but technically this all belongs to the city and county of San Francisco. And as I mentioned, the channel runs east-west and then north-south up to the bay. This is really the meat of what we want to talk about. Prior to 2000, maintenance for us was fairly easy. We would go in annually or as needed, come in with heavy equipment, and take out the sediment and take out the vegetation. We'd also maintain the access road. Right about 2000, 2002 timeframe, BART came in and they extended their tracks down to Millbrae. When that project came in, everything changed. The channel that went from San Bruno was realigned under and through the BART tracks to get to the east-west segment. But what really occurred at that time was a higher awareness of the endangered species in that area. As I show up here, we weren't allowed to do any maintenance in that area between 2000 and 2002. This is an example of the maintenance road that was affected by the BART construction. We say in our slide that it was lowered. It was actually, the lowering was done by the heavy equipment that was placed out there, and as I said, we couldn't get out there to maintain it. So sandbags were placed along the edge of the channel, and in 2002, we had some overtopping at that time. After BART left, we applied for maintenance permits, and now we're in a new regulatory environment. We're able to get one-time permits to clear vegetation and sediment. When we did that in 2003, that cost us about $535,000. And as I said, the primary cost is our biologists. When we go in there and work, we're either hand-cutting vegetation or when we dig out sediment, we have a biologist standing next to the excavator, looking at that bucket, looking at it go in the truck, and making sure that there's no frogs or snakes in there. As you can imagine, the labor costs on these jobs get pretty expensive. After that, from 2004 to 2008, we received permits to go in and hand cut. And then we began working with the San Francisco International Airport to look at how we can work in this area but still maintain the habitat for the red-legged frog and the San Francisco garter snake. So we're constantly facing this battle of trying to preserve the habitat for these species while trying to maintain flood control. And what came out of those discussions was that the airport developed it's called a recovery action plan. And the purpose of the recovery action plan was to increase the population of the garter snake as well as the red-legged frog. And the intent was to increase those populations so that when they're thriving, we will be more likely to be able to get in and do the work that we need because those populations are less affected. As you can see, we're dealing with several different agencies when we get permitting. And at times, these agencies have different comments on their permits that are sometimes in opposition to those agencies that have given us other comments. So it becomes a little bit difficult to work sometimes. But this plan was approved in 2008, and it's to be implemented in 3 phases. So a big portion of this plan, the phase 1 plan, was to deal with the east-west part of the channel. And what the RAP suggested was to cut out scalloped areas or widen the channel in certain areas to provide a wet habitat so the frogs and snakes can breed and flourish in those areas. So that RAP was implemented in 2008. During that period, or actually that construction was implemented in 2008. During that period, we continued to work on the north-south channel by hand-cutting vegetation. But one of the conditions of that permit for the RAP was that we could do no maintenance in the east-west segment. So as you can imagine, vegetation began to flourish in that area. I'm going to go through a series of slides that shows exactly what happened. On the left side, you'll see the condition of the channel in 2008, and I apologize for the shadows, but that's all we've got. On the right side, you'll see this condition of the channel in 2009, and you can see those scallops carved out of there. Well, over time, in 2010, you start seeing the vegetation really begin to take over. In 2011, it gets worse, and in 2012, it's to a point where we're really restricting our capacity in that channel. So fast forward to December 2nd, 2012, we had a series of storms that went through from Wednesday through Sunday, and there was a significant amount of water that dumped during that period. We've checked and found that there was roughly 3.7 inches of rain that fell during that roughly 5-day period. And what happened was we had some overtopping of that channel. Now, the overtopping, from what we can tell, occurred because of the dense cattails that are right next to the area where it overtopped. From what we can tell, the flow came down that channel, debris and water hit those cattails, and it overtopped at that location. So that is the reason why that happened. Now, what we've done since then is work collaboratively with San Francisco International Airport to try to get some emergency permits to get in there. We are attempting to get permits from Fish and Wildlife, that's a federal agency, and Fish and Game, which is a state agency, to go in there within the next week or two and cut down those cattails so that we don't have that obstruction. I learned today that one of the two agencies has approved our emergency permit to go in. We haven't heard from the other agency yet, but we are going to attempt to get in there. We're hoping this weekend. We're going to continue to push the other agency to try to get in there. Phase 2 of the RAP is going to involve continuing this along the north-south segment of this channel. But what we're going to try to suggest and get approval for in this Phase 2 part of the project is to be able to do sediment removal on that east-west segment along with vegetation removal. So in terms of long-term for this channel, as I mentioned, it is a very difficult area to work. We have very little revenues, and we've got a tough regulatory environment. And we've got a channel that was designed for a 25-year storm, which over the years, we've seen 25-year storms more often. So what we would like to do, or what we need to do in the future, is to upgrade both of our pump stations to continue the channel maintenance in that area. We also need to upgrade the floodgates out at San Francisco Bay to keep saltwater intrusion from working its way in. And I think most importantly, we'd like to work with your city and your staff to identify additional revenue sources so that we can make these capital projects happen. The 1%, the portion of the 1% that we're getting is simply inadequate to do some of the work that we need to do. So over the long term, we're going to need to look at various other methods of getting revenue. And there's several options available. We operate another flood control district where we've done some bonding. They have a larger revenue stream, but we can talk about that in the future. And that really concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Council have any questions of Mr. Porter? Mr. Rico?
I just had one question. Could you maybe explain a little bit?
Right into the mic, Mr. Rico. Thank you.
Robert Rico, 7th Avenue. Could you explain a little bit the tide gates and how they are affected by high and low tides? And does that restrict water under certain conditions from flowing into the bay and therefore backing up? Thank you.
Sure, in addressing that question, the purpose of the tide gates are to inhibit salt water, essentially the bay, from getting into the channel during high tides. But the flap gates open when there's a high flow, so that the way that they're designed is when you get pressure from the water that's coming from the channel, it'll open the tide gates and the water will flow in. When you have low flow situations but a high tide, it keeps the water from going up into the channel. The trick is when the tide's up and the water's flowing in, if they're at a very close elevation, you will get some, a little bit of resistance from the water from San Bruno flood control channel going out into the bay. At that portion of the channel itself, though, we have a little bit more capacity to hold the water. So it's not as influenced up at the Cupid Row area, but that's the way that that's the way the design is intended to work.
Good. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your presentation. I understand the dilemma you're faced with you know, the lack of funds, but the work that has to be done. But of course, the third leg of that is the protection of the snakes and the frogs. And you know, my real concern is the protection of the residents in the lower part of San Bruno, because I saw some of those pictures, and we have to find a better balance here, because it sounds like a lot of those snakes and frogs could move over to Sharps Park. They're going to redo a lot of that habitat, so maybe we can dredge some stuff a little quicker and really put the concentration on the people that are actually paying to do the dredging. So thank you very much.
We'll do our best. Thank you.
Let's see, review of the agenda. I would like to move item number 11, which is the report of the Traffic Safety and Parking Committee, up to right after item 8, public hearings. Any other changes? All right, seeing none. Approval of the minutes, special city council meeting of November 27, 2012. All right, any errors, corrections, omissions? Seeing none, they will be approved as submitted. Consent calendar, all items on consent calendar are considered routine or implemented earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested by the council member, citizen, or staff. Any action on the consent calendar? Irene?
Through the chair, I'd like to pull 7E, please.
7E, all right. Anyone else?
Through the chair,
Michael?
I'd like to pull 7G.
G?
If there are no other items, move to approve the rest of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion approved. On the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Item E, adopt a resolution amending the city classification plan by adopting position descriptions for fire battalion chief, fire captain, and firefighter positions. Is that
I'm
right?
sorry, that's F.
No, G.
No, it's E.
Well, my
This
E
is
is
a draft.
approved
Block grant.
contract with the San Mateo
One
County
was sent to me.
Housing Department. Do we have a different?
So. Yeah, I do. I
Oh,
do.
I have the same as.
I was,
Oh, okay. My E
I was
says.
sent the draft.
I know. I have your E.
Okay.
All right,
My
let's,
E says.
let's try E again.
Okay.
Adopt a resolution approving contract with San Mateo County Housing Department for $63,000 in block grant funds to make accessibility improvements to library, meeting room, restrooms.
Thank you. I pulled this to compliment staff for being so aggressive getting the grants that make the improvements to our city. Not only the library, Park and Rec, and community development, but also the public works and almost every other, police, fire, every department, even though that's a county council policy to be aggressive in getting grants, you people actually do it, and our city's so much better off because you do. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you all.
Through the chair, just to add to that, this was a grant for $63,000, and that coupled with the previous grant of $78,500, that's over $140,000 in free money, you know, to make these improvements. So my compliments also to staff.
Okay, action on item G, I'm sorry, E.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Item G is adopt a resolution authorizing the purchase of a backup generator from Cummins West in the amount of $42,758.75. Michael?
Thank you. I spoke earlier with the city manager regarding this item, and Connie, I don't know if you had a chance to respond. I didn't get a chance to check email later in the afternoon. I did get responses on the other items, and so thank you for taking care of those. But regarding 7G, do you want me to go through my questions?
But I'd be happy to go through them, and we have
Thank you.
Al Johnson here ready at the mic in case I misspeak or if there's any additional information. So there were 3 questions. And the first had to do with whether the cost of a portable unit might be more expensive than a stationary unit by virtue of the potential that it needed to be more robust in order to be able to deal with the wear and tear of potentially being moved. And although the staff was not necessarily looking for portability as part of this purchase, The portable unit is actually less expensive in that it does not require the installation of a pad or a foundation in order to install the unit. And the staff was able to acquire a unit with a significantly larger capacity and portable for a lower price than we would have otherwise received, and which would have otherwise met the minimum needs of the facility. Second question had to do with the page that you see that's attached to the staff report, which is out of our capital improvement program budget, and it identifies a $531,000 cost for cable television equipment as part of our capital budget. A generator is not listed among those items, but it is an essential purchase, and it is one that staff does not anticipate will increase the overall cost of equipment purchases for the coming year. Unfortunately, that item is now a fairly urgent priority, and it's one of the things that we believe is most important to stabilize the continuous operation of our facilities. But again, should not affect the total budget or the need, should not require additional funds. I'm going to let Al Johnson respond to the third question, which had to do with energy efficiency and what staff has done and how this, in order to evaluate energy efficiency and in operation of our head-end facility, and how this generator unit might affect the ability of the system to operate cost effectively.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I believe the question was the load as the generator turned on was one of the questions there. We do have a standby backup power supply, which when the power cuts off, this standby power supply maintains the power for about 5 to 10 minutes while the generator kicks on, gets stabilized, and switches over, so there's no extra draw on the generator. And the generators have been sized to, we only run it at 75% max of the generator. So if there is a little extra current, it has plenty of current to handle the on and off. That goes the same thing when the power comes back on. The UPS mains holds it while it switches the transfer switch over, and it runs for about 10 minutes while the power stabilizes, making sure the outside power does not cut off and on. So it runs for a good 15 minutes and maintains that power. The rest of the head end, the air conditioners, we just put new air conditioners on about 2 years ago, which were at the time were one of the best energy savers that we have. And we also installed a whole house fan in case one of the air conditioners go out. In this weather up on top of the mountain, it's fairly cool, so the whole house could bring out that 50-degree weather into the head end, which will help cool it off. So we're lucky we're in a situation, climate we are in, it doesn't get that hot very often up there.
Okay. Thank you. And when I was talking with the city manager about some of these things, the topic came up about overall efficiency of the equipment that's up there and the facility itself. I've been up there. It's been a while, but I know it's a pretty the facility's been there for a while, and I don't know if there have been opportunities to evaluate how efficient the overall infrastructure is, and if there was anything we could do to perhaps cut the amount of energy that's used in that facility.
We have been looking at it. We just received a new building from Nextel Sprint. They were leased our tower and had a portable building up there, and we just received that. They were deeded it over to us for no cost. Actually, we got a couple of dollars for it. And we're going to be looking at moving some of the equipment out of the main building into that to take some of the stress off that main building. Mm-hmm. And we're in the process of working with that now. This new generator that we're getting is big enough to put the standby on that second building too. So that would be fully backed up too.
Okay. All right, thank you. And the other question was just a minor question. Was what is the expected lifespan of the new unit that's being brought in?
Well, we have two own-ad generators, which is basically the same engine, and one's been going over 15 years and one was 25. So I would say another good 15 years or more on this one that we're purchasing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the chair. And just add one quick question. Would we not have items like this or similar to having an equipment reserve, so we have monies that are allocated on an annual basis, so when we have a purchase that may be needed in 10 years from now, another generator or something to that degree? We've talked about it years ago. There was some apparatus that needed to be replaced, and we discussed possibly putting some of these items on equipment reserve so that we pay as we go per se, so when we need it, as we do in the other items.
If I don't know the answer about what equipment is currently reserved, but we will certainly take a look at how these generators can be incorporated into that program.
Thank you.
Action on item G.
I guess I will move to approve the final item.
Second.
Motion second on the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item number 8, public hearings. We're going to hold a public hearing and adopt an urgency ordinance amending the contract between the Board of Administration of the California Public Employees Retirement System, CalPERS, and the City of San Bruno to include provisions pursuant to Government Code Section 20475, implementing the 2% at 55 retirement formula miscellaneous group and 3% at 55 retirement formula fire group. Kim.
Great, thank you. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. As you are aware, the city currently contracts with the California Public Employees Retirement System to provide retirement benefits to our 3 separate PERS units, which includes the miscellaneous employees, fire employees, and police employees. The city currently contracts at a 2.7 at 55 formula for miscellaneous employees and a 3% at 50 formula for fire and police employees. Due to the recent pension reform legislation that passed a few months ago, the ability of cities to amend their current existing CalPERS contracts going forward will be limited, and those contract amendments can only be made through the end of this calendar year. As you know, we have been in negotiations with our bargaining units. We have reached agreements with 4 of our 6 bargaining units, which all include an tentative agreement with a 5th unit, and all of those allow for a provision of a second-tier retirement for miscellaneous employees at a 2% at 55 formula, and for fire employees at a 3% at 55 formula. On November 15th, the City Council unanimously adopted a resolution of intent signaling the city's interest and intent to move forward with a contract amendment. This amendment must be executed by the end of the calendar year, and it is contingent on the city reaching agreements with the remaining 2 employee units that have not yet settled. While we can move forward with the adoption of this ordinance, and I would just add that this is an urgency ordinance, as was discussed at the meeting on November 15th, because of these time constraints that we're operating under, we have to adopt this via urgency ordinance, which would then authorize the city to move forward with the execution of the contract amendment by the end of the calendar year. Now, so we can move forward with the adoption of the urgency ordinance. However, if we do not reach an agreement with those 2 remaining bargaining units within this time frame, we would repeal the ordinance and not proceed with the execution of those contract amendment documents. So the action tonight is to ask that we move forward with the adoption of the ordinance so that we are able to amend the contract if we reach those agreements. And just a reminder that an urgency ordinance does require 4 affirmative votes of the council to be adopted.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions for our finance director? All right, at this time we'll open the public hearing. Does anyone like to speak on this item? If we close the public hearing, you're going to be precluded from talking on this again. Motion?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion or action by the council?
Do you introduce this ordinance? Introduce the ordinance?
Councilmember O'Connell. Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Ibarra.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Good, great. Item number 11 will follow item number 8, which is reports of commissions, boards, and committees. We're going to receive the annual report from the Traffic Safety and Parking Committee.
Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Eric Wood, and I am the chairman of the Traffic Safety and Parking Committee. I'm here to give you our annual report for 2012. First, I'd like to, we had one individual this year that moved out of the area. His name was Tim Fuller, so he's left. And then we have a new member, Tim Ross, that actually came tonight to replace him.
It's convenient, huh?
Yeah, Tim and Tim. So it's good for me because then I won't remember, I won't forget. Our committee could not function without city staff. So I'd just like to take a moment to thank Clara and Tina, because without them, we wouldn't have any meetings. So I just really appreciate the support that we get from city staff. Oh yeah, I have to click. As you know, we're an advisory, in an advisory capacity. So we don't actually, we just make advice based on the information and the data that we gather and then bring it forth to you guys for you guys to make an actual decision. What's been nice is what we've actually done and what you guys have implemented behind the scenes, a lot of the tools that we put in place to actually give city staff information about how to actually make a decision without having to come to us or come to you guys for every, I want a handicap in front of my house, or I want the in front of my house, I want it parked red because I can't park in front of my house, or whatever things that had come before us that really didn't need to come before us. So we implemented the traffic calming, the parking, and the traffic calming toolkit, and then the parking restriction application, and it's been working. So I just wanted to say thank you, because what you guys adopted has actually been working. So we're seeing it, and you're going to see it in the presentation today, things that didn't even have to come before you because we've already basically put the process in place. I wanted to do it in a month, but it took a little bit longer, but I understand.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. We actually, the parking restriction application, been in effect since 2010, but really it's been a year. And the traffic calming toolkit has been in effect exactly a year. But as you'll see, the application, the parking restriction application, is actually really working. So I've been kind of excited that it's what we've actually been putting in place is working. So we engage the community. The best way that we do it is actually through the mail. So when we have an issue that comes before us, staff sends out letters within a certain radius, and then it's open for open comment. And I think this is probably the most powerful part of what we do, is allow for public comment, for people to come and voice their opinion without having to come here, to someone that we can listen and engage in them, and you'll see in here, usually point them in the right direction. This year we had 47 people come. So, I mean, for a committee, that's great. Some of the things that we did this year on the 3 no parking requests, again, these were requests from people that lived in the community, either if they were business owners or if they were just residents. So the first one was westbound Genevieve Avenue east of the intersection at Cypress Avenue. The TSPC approved it and you guys declined it, but that's okay because it's working.
Thank you.
Yeah. Another one that didn't come before you guys was westbound Amador Avenue, east of a 10-foot driveway to the Portola Elementary School Lower Field Access Road. And again, they wanted the no parking. We just didn't feel that taking parking away was appropriate, and so we declined it. And there's an appeal process in place, but the person that originally submitted it didn't appeal it. So again, it just died right there. East side of Linden Avenue, south of the intersection at San Felipe Avenue. Again, it was a no parking issue, and we declined it, and it didn't go any further. We then had one removal of a non-city council approved no parking area. That was on Montgomery by Hermosa, and we approved it, and I think you guys accepted it too. But and then we've also done the other part of it. It's just not parking and no parking restrictions, but is the traffic calming measures, which when I started in 2008 was one of the reasons I came was because of the traffic. And as we all know, San Bruno was more designed smaller vehicles in one way, so we do have traffic issues, but I really think the tools that we've put in place and the areas that we've tried, we really do have a good idea of what will work and what won't work. The picture here is on the one from Crestmore, but we've done the same thing now. I think it's on Fleetwood, where we've put in the solar with the light. And Fleetwood is downhill, uphill, and it's a speed issue. So when you have speed issues, there's only so many things that you can do. But again, that we've learned that just by simply putting up your speed, yeah, you'll get the occasional guy to see how fast he can go. But most of the time, we do see that people pay attention. So, it's kind of neat to see your work in action. One of the other areas that we've looked at, not just the park, we looked at redoing the park. That went really well because we all wanted the crosswalk there. But one of the areas that was probably not addressed in years was Cherry Avenue. And with the new businesses, with Walmart, with everybody coming in, before we actually looked at this intersection, the crosswalk was faded. You couldn't tell, you couldn't see, and we were worried from a safety standpoint. So we were able to give our opinions, and as you can see, it's not just a crosswalk, but it's like vivid, like let people cross. So before, it was kind of like cross at will, and but now it's much, much better. We looked not just at Cherry here. We looked up the street at the light and some of the other areas. So we looked at it as a whole instead of just one segment. So 2008, one of the first things that I wasn't the chairman, I was just sitting on the committee. One of the workers that works here right near where this is over in the Commodore Drive, she came with a petition, and she had gotten, I don't remember how many people to sign the petition to tell us how bad the area was. So we knew from an advisory standpoint, we were like, okay, we're limited, and we don't know how much funds the staff has, but go to the bicycle committee, because the bicycle committee might be able to get you a grant to actually do some of the work. So it took a few years, but it's done, and it's so much better. You can walk from BART station now all the way to Bay Hill. I mean, before you were walking on the street. So this is one of the areas where public came to us, we listened, pointed them in the right direction, and it got done. So that was, it's really neat, again, seeing your work in action. So 2013 going forward, we're going to be focusing, again, on the same thing, the parking restrictions, stop signs, traffic calming. The nice thing that staff does is they put together a list for us of everything that's on our agenda. So every time we come to the meeting, we know that, hey, so one of these items has been on here for a long time. Well, what's going on with it? Oh, well, we're waiting for this and this. So we know. So we have a list. We're not kind of coming in blind. We have an idea almost every single month when we get together, what are we going to be doing and what are the other things that we could be doing. So we have 5 pending traffic calming stuff. It's been in the queue. We've been working on other things. So within hopefully 6 months, we'll be able to clean it up. And then when new requests come in, then we can address them. Any questions?
Any questions, Ken?
The committee has come a long way.
It has.
I was on the committee in the early 90s, and yeah, there was things that would come along, and sometimes it was just stop signs or red curbs, but it's pretty complex now. I want to compliment you on that. I am very proud of the Commodore Drive. I was instrumental in promoting that grant through the county, and actually members on the committee from other communities said that it was a no-brainer, and it's good to see it finally finished. One thing that I'm always aware of is when I come out of driveways, and I think that's something that maybe that the committee could probably look at is site visibility, because sometimes shrubs get overgrown and stuff, and sometimes you got to close your eyes before you go out in the line of traffic and hope that you don't get hit. But those are some of the safety issues that I'm always concerned about. But for the most part, the committee's doing great, and I love the fact that you have these toolkits and everything that you can screen these projects.
Yeah, we definitely take like site. That's one of the big things. We always like to have pictures. And again, staff, that's what they do, is they've been giving us pictures, which makes a huge difference. Even though you know it, you drive it, you see it, but when you have the picture in front of you. Cherry Avenue was one of the prime examples on the island that they had bushes, and that was one of the can you just cut the bush so that people could see? And it was done. So yeah, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, because site speed are usually the 2 main things.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Chair, just real quick, Eric, I just wanted to thank you for your passion, as well as keeping the things on the queue. I think is important, because I think far too many times a resident comes, like you said, you had 47, and then maybe just it seems to get lost through the cracks. I think that's been greatly improved, and I also encourage you to continue on as far as wanting things to move faster than they currently do. So keep on that path.
I will. Thanks.
Good, and thank you to not just you, but all of our commissioners and committee members. This is what makes a city run, is the volunteerism, and a lot of people don't realize how many volunteers we have in the city. I'm the liaison to the committee, and I actually showed up, I think, twice this year, and told you that I would help you in any way I could, as long as it didn't involve any money. But we're all still around. Numbers are out there if you need anything at all that we can provide. We're here. But thanks again. Thanks. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Item number 9, public comment on items not on the agenda. It is the council's policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Would anyone like to address the council under public comment?
Mr. Mayor and Council, my name is Bob George. I live here in San Bruno on Chabot Drive, and I'm here tonight, as I have been in many previous Decembers, representing HIP Housing. HIP stands for Human Investment Project, and it is a 40-year-old nonprofit that attempts to match low-income people with good housing here in San Mateo County. One of the things that has become an icon of HIP over the years is the calendar contest, and it's not really a contest, but it's a children's art calendar. This year's participants were from elementary schools in Redwood City, East Palo Alto, Foster City, and San Mateo. We present what is called, at this point, an anachronism. It's an actual calendar printed on paper, just like we used to see when we were growing up. There's nothing electronic about it. But I have, and as a token of our agency's appreciation for San Bruno's steady and constant support of HIP housing, I wanted to leave calendars for each of you and for staff members as a token of our appreciation for what the city has done for HIP housing over the years. Happy holidays to all of you.
And same to you, Bob. Thank you for all the work you do. Anyone else under public comment? All right, move right on to conduct of business. First item is item 10A, conduct the annual reorganization of the City Council and appointment of Vice Mayor to serve a one-year term. And I believe in the rotation, Irene O'Connell is scheduled.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there's actually a couple of items, the most important being the annual rotation of the vice mayor. You need to confirm the annual rotation that is according to the formula that the city council has used now for a very long time. Councilmember O'Connell is next in line to become vice mayor. The other item that I would call your attention to is the two papers that are in your packet. One which recites the current assignments of the City Council to regional and other regional assignments to committees for which the city is represented but have a regional perspective, and internal City Council standing subcommittees. The second document in your packet outlines the annual rotation of the City Council's assignment of each of you to two of our citizen advisory boards and commissions as a liaison person. And as the council is aware, it is council's policy to rotate those assignments annually, so each of you will do a turn with each of the boards and commissions to help the City Council and our citizen advisors stay well connected and to make sure that the work of the city is being done in an efficient manner. So unless the council has any changes or discussion or comment on the regional assignments or the liaison assignments, your only real action tonight is to confirm the rotation of the vice mayor.
Okay. Any other questions regarding any of the other items? Action. We need a motion on that? Yes, we do.
I'd recommend that you do that.
Through the chair, I'd like to, as much as I'm unwilling to give up my seat, and I'm so proud and honored to serve as vice mayor, and I will make a motion to appoint Councilmember Irene O'Connell as vice mayor for 2013.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. Trying to be nice here. We're both second.
Okay.
I know they want me to continue.
So all seconds and thirds and...
No, I wanted to get this going.
Okay. Motion is second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Congratulations. Item 10B, adopt a resolution authorizing the sale of pension obligation bonds to refinance outstanding fund obligations of the city to the California Public Employees Retirement System, approving the form of related financing documents and approving official actions.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. So I figured I would tackle this presentation by answering three questions that I think are important for everybody here to understand with regards to this financing, this proposed financing. So the first question that I will ask and answer for you is really to talk about what is a side fund, because this refinancing, these pension obligation bonds that are before you this evening, are an issuance to refund a debt that currently exists between the city and the CalPERS agency. So a side fund, just to go back, in 2003, CalPERS merged many of the smaller units that had less than 100 employees into risk pools. So at that point in time, they were independent. They each had their own rates. And in an attempt to reduce the volatility of rates, they took a lot of the smaller plans of less than 100 employees and put them into risk pools. And so that included both the police and fire units for the city. They were merged into a safety pool with other agencies. At that time, when they went into that pool, there was an unfunded liability at that point in time in 2003 that basically said, you've put in this much money to the system. This is the difference between what has been put in and what you actuarially has been determined that you owe to CalPERS to fund your retirement obligations at this point in time. So a side fund was created at that point in time to be paid by the city over a term of 25 years. So this is going back to 2003. That side fund has been paid by the city, and it is paid through current contribution rates that we pay for our safety employees. So right now we pay in excess of 36.6% for our safety employees to PERS. And of that 36%, 11.8% of that is to pay the side fund obligation. So this is a number that we do pay as part of our rates, and we will continue to pay for the next 14 years through June 2027. So it's a real dollar amount that we know and that we will continue to pay. In addition, PERS charges a discount rate, basically charges us interest on that liability at a rate of 7.5%. Now that rate was recently decreased from 7.75% earlier this year, so they reviewed their investments and decided that a decrease in that rate was the proper way to proceed. And so right now it's 7.5%. This is again a fixed dollar amount, a fixed percentage. Now, what could happen, a possibility is that PERS could decide, right now we're paying 7.5%, PERS could decide to revisit their investment assumptions, and they could possibly lower the rate down another another notch to 7.25 or something. So it is a possibility that PERS could at some point in the future determine to reduce that investment rate. But however, at this point in time, we're using 7.5% as the basis of our calculations. So the next question I wanted to ask and answer is really, what is a pension obligation bond? And I think you hear a lot about them in the media. They get a bad rap because they can be structured in many different ways. Many agencies, or some agencies, have issued pension obligation bonds to address a cash flow issue that they're having. They can't fund their pensions or current pension costs. They have a budget shortfall. The answer might be issuing pension obligation bonds. That's not what this is. This isn't we're not looking to issue pension obligation bonds because of any of those types of issues. We are really looking at doing this simply because the finances are telling us that this is what makes sense, again, because we're paying the 7.5% interest rate, and we think in the market we could get significantly lower interest rates, and therefore pay this side fund off at PERS and be done with it and reduce our current retirement rates. So the next section, I'm going to walk through basically the terms of the issuance. As you know, we've been evaluating pension obligation bonds. I think we first spoke to the City Council about this back in June during the budget study sessions, and then proceeded with a judicial validation action in late June, which was completed on September 19th. The city's financing team, who some of them are here in the audience this evening, includes Fieldman Roll-Up and Associates, who has been serving as the city's financial advisor, Jones Hall as bond counsel, and Prager Sealing Company as the city's underwriter. In working with the city, have determined that the market conditions right now are such, they're extremely favorable, and it makes sense for us to consider moving forward in 2012 with the issuance of pension obligation bonds. These favorable market conditions are obviously the low interest rates that everybody has seen, as well as a recent issuance, similar issuance by the town of Carmel, similar issuance of a smaller dollar amount but to pay off a side fund that was well received by the market. So the early estimates at this point in time indicate that the city would likely be able to obtain an interest rate of somewhere around 4%. So that would be a decrease from 7.5% to 4%. And based on our current side fund of $12.6 million would represent about a 20% net present value savings over the term of the 14 years to the city. In the amount of the issuance would be, at this point in time, it's still an estimate as we're waiting for our final payoff number from PERS. However, the par amount would be just over $13 million and would include all the cost of issuance. So that would include the fees for the bond counsel, financial advisor, and all the underwriting fees, which would be just about $300,000. So should the City Council decide to move forward with the issuance of these bonds, adoption of the resolution that is before you this evening will authorize the issuance of the bonds, and it will also approve, there's a number of attachments that were a part of the packet, including the preliminary official statement, which is the document that presents a description of the city and its finances and the revenue sources, as well as risk factors that bondholders or potential bond investors should be aware of. And this is the document that is circulated at the time of sale to investors. There's an indenture of trust agreement, and this is the agreement that exists between the city and its trustee, and in this case that would be Union Bank, that basically highlights the rules and responsibilities of each party, and for the city includes our requirement to make the bond payments annually, as well as to include those bond payments, the debt service, in our budget. Finally, the last document is the bond purchase agreement. So this is the agreement that it would exist between the city and the underwriter, which is Prager Sealy and Company, to basically purchase, accept delivery, and pay for the bonds. And it also includes the underwriter's compensation of not to exceed 1%, which is included in those issuance costs that I talked about earlier. The resolution also provides assurance that the bonds will not be issued if market conditions were to change, interest rates were to go up. It provides the assurance that unless the net present value savings is in excess of 5%, we would not issue the bonds. So it assures a minimum savings of 5%. And as I indicated earlier, early estimates say that it could be in excess of 20%. However, we won't know until we get to the market and also when we get our final credit rating. So assuming City Council approval of these items, next steps would be to get the credit rating. The city provided a presentation to Standard & Poor's last week and is awaiting a rating sometime later this week. And once we have the rating, then the underwriter can work towards identifying potential investors and have an order period. So we would hope to enter the market on or before December 20th. And finally, we would close the bonds and pay off the current side fund with PERS on December 28th, which is before the end of the year. And at that time of payoff, CalPERS would therefore reduce our PERS rate for safety members going forward by an amount of roughly 11.8% currently. The city's bond payments going forward, should we do this, would come from the city's general fund. It's a debt of the general fund, and it would be offset, while the debt service would be paid from the general fund, it would be offset by a reduction in the general fund retirement costs as a result of reducing the rate for police and fire members. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And also we have members of the financing team here to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions for the Finance Director? Any action by the council?
I'll introduce the resolution.
Vice Mayor O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item 10C, adopt a resolution accepting donation from the San Bruno Lions Club for labor and materials to make improvements to Beckner Shelter with the approximate value of $28,000.
Okay, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. I am Danielle Brewer with the Community Services Department. About a year ago, park staff started noticing an ongoing problem with the Beckner Shelter roof, has several leaks and dry rot. To gather a cost estimate to be placed on the 2013-2014 CIP budget, staff contacted C&J Roofing. The owner of C&J Roofing is a member of the San Bruno Lions Club and brought the project to the club as a possible community service project. Director Schwartz met with the Lions Club representatives on Friday, November 30th regarding the shelter needs. The club is interested in doing the following work to the shelter: repairing the dry rot on the roof, power washing the interior of the roof, applying a clear coat stain to the interior of the roof, replacing the lights, sanitizing the floor in the shelter, and off-hauling all the debris. This work should be done in approximately 4 days, and they will do it all when there are no rentals, so it will not impact any services. All work will also be done under the direct supervision of qualified licensed contractors. Sometime in 2013, the Lions Club will also replace the water fountain. The city will have full approval of the design of the water fountain prior to installation. A recognition plaque with the Lions Club logo will be placed somewhere within the shelter. The photo demonstrates 2 locations that may be appropriate. Staff will work on the size and the material of the signs, and the city staff will also have full approval of the signs prior to it being hung. This is the first option, and there's the second possibility. Neither one of these are confirmed. The sign will be about this big, not huge. But again, full approval will happen prior to it being hung. If the City Council wishes, staff can work with the Park and Rec Commission on approval of the sign as well as the design of the water fountain. The amount of the donation for the project is approximately $28,000. Staff recommends to Council to accept the donation of labor and materials to make the improvements to Beckner Shelter.
Great, thank you. It's exciting. Any questions?
If I could, I mean, if you have questions, I'd like to explain
Lion
some.
Ibera.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Lion can, yeah. As the resident Lion, I have to compliment Lion Cause Janulis of CJ Roofing. He could have taken it upon himself to put in a bid and done the work through his business, but recognize that the club does have some funds that we can apply towards capital projects like this, and so he was thinking about the club to, get us involved, put our mark on the community. And so, as I sit up here and will vote for it, I am actually going to be part of that volunteer work group out there. So, I'm looking forward to it. I will be fully supervised, believe me. Yeah. So, I think it's something that the Lions, it's what we should do, and to have a value of even just $28,000, that's $28,000 that the city could use in something else more important. So.
Great. Anyone else or action?
If any other questions, I'd be honored to adopt the resolution for approval.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell. Aye. Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Thank you to the Lions. Very nice. Item 10D, adopt a resolution adopting a complete streets policy.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm Laura Russell, a planner in the Community Development Department. Tonight we are presenting a proposed complete streets policy, which is a joint effort of the Public Services and Community Development Departments. Over the past few years, complete streets have become a priority in both regional planning efforts as well as funding opportunities, so we're bringing it to you now for your consideration. The basic idea of complete streets is to provide a safe and convenient transportation network for everyone. That includes pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, transit riders, everyone regardless of their age or ability. The objective is to achieve a more balanced transportation system between vehicles and other modes of travel. It is important that complete streets be sensitive to the context. For example, different complete streets measures would be appropriate around the Caltrain station than might be appropriate up in the Rollingwood neighborhood. So some of the benefits of complete streets include improved safety and mobility for a wide range of people, sustainability benefits, especially air and water quality, public health through increased activity. There's also economic and real estate development benefits. And the City Council will recall that OBAG, which is the One Bay Area Grant Program, is a new funding approach that is replacing several other grant programs and bringing those funding sources all together. To be eligible for OBAG funding, each city must pass a resolution or complete a general plan amendment integrating complete streets. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC, has outlined 9 recommended elements in a complete streets policy. So these are those policy elements, and they're presented with the numbering that corresponds to the resolution that you have before you. So again, A1 is the idea of serving all users, regardless of their age and ability. A2 is really thinking about the context. What is the type of road? What is the facility like? What are the slopes or the proximity to active uses? And under this policy, all city departments would routinely consider complete streets for all projects and throughout all phases. So that could include things like bicycle facilities, street trees, accessible curb ramps, enhanced crosswalks, and traffic calming measures as identified in the city's traffic calming toolkit. Each transportation project would be reviewed for consistency with existing plans. So this includes things like the general plan or the transit corridor plan if or when that plan is approved, as well as the community-based transportation plan and regional plans. This would formalize an existing practice that engineering and planning staff already practice, but it would formalize that process. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee would review the relevant transportation projects and provide comments. That would also offer an opportunity for additional public review. They have expressed their strong support for the proposed policy and their willingness to participate as the policy if it goes forward. I'd also like to point out that in order for a project to be exempt from complete streets, the Public Services Director would have to make written findings explaining why complete streets measures were not appropriate for that project, and those findings would be available if the public wished to review them. The general plan already includes strong policies that are directly related to complete streets. This includes an emphasis on safe and convenient routes for all modes of travel and improved connections between local activity centers. In the future, the city will have to update the general plan for complete streets to remain eligible for OBAG funding and to be compliant with state law. So the proposed policy reinforces the importance of a transportation network that serves everyone, all residents of the community. And the city already has existing policies and procedures. This complete streets policy really brings it together in one place to formalize that process. As you are aware, the BPAC already reviews many projects, and this policy would extend that BPAC review to all relevant transportation projects. So the complete streets policy is included in a resolution form for your consideration tonight, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff? Any action?
Through the chair.
Ken?
Laura, as a representative on the BPAC in the county, this is, you stated, is required to qualify for any granting with OBAG. Is that correct?
Yes, it is
Yeah.
required.
Yeah. So previous grants through CCAG, didn't matter, what jurisdictions. They just had projects that were judged and were granted funds. So now they have to qualify with these types of policies and to be able to apply for the grants. So I'm very pleased because being sitting on this committee, this advisory committee, which will pass on to my vice mayor colleague here, we stand very well positioned to have whatever projects that we see fit to get grant money for.
Anyone else? Action by the council?
I'll introduce the resolution.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell. Mayor Ruane.
Aye. Item 10E, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Erler and Kalinowski, Inc. for a well 15 replacement project in an amount not to exceed $606,000.
Honorable Mayor, Council Member, good evening. I have here with me Wing Wang, who is the project manager for this well replacement project, and also Mark Reinhardt, the water resource manager, who led the effort for the prior two phases of this project with Eaton pump assessment of the condition of the pump, and also the site assessment and the site analysis for this project. I will summarize why this project is important, what is the project, and what the financial consequences of the project is. The city provides drinking water to our city residents. The water comes from two sources. Surface water purchased from SFPUC and from groundwater produced by our wells. Historically, the city consumption is around 4.1, 4.2 million gallons per day. The city has a guaranteed allocation from the surface water through SFPUC's contract for a 3.2 MGD. I will use MGD from now on, which really means million gallon per day. If the city will enter in the agreement with SFPUC for the groundwater storage and recovery project, then the city has to have the capability to produce at least 2.1 MGD. Historically, the city maintained a reliable, flexible, redundant system, producing about half of our need versus purchasing half of the other for our need. In order for us to be able to sustain a production level, is very important for us to maintain our production infrastructure. For production, the city had 5 wells. The Commodore well, called well 15, was the oldest well in the city, built in '84. The production of this well started to decrease and reached a point back in 2010 then that the well was decommissioned and the services of Eaton Pump was retained to assess the cost-benefit analysis of rehabilitation of the wells versus replacement of the well. The conclusion of the assessment was that the expected production rate after the rehabilitation will be low versus the investment cost that wasn't cost effective to rehabilitate the well. The recommendation was to replace the well. Subsequently, the services of our groundwater management expert consultant was retained to develop a site assessment having the best understanding and knowledge, developing our groundwater management plan of the hydrogeology of the basin, groundwater basin itself, and to make recommendation what would be the best sites for replacing the well. They analyzed 6 different sites, and you have a very detailed staff report, and all of those sites are described in the staff report. Their recommendation at the end of the analysis was to recommend 2 sites, Commodore and Archstone, at the Archstone site. The reason for recommending those 2 sites was based on the combination of different criteria, mainly the expected production level, water quantity, and also the expected water quality at those sites, and including the land use around those 2 sites and the degree of impact on the surrounding environment of those two locations. The recommended plan for this project is to, after the design of the 2 test wells, to drill the 2 test wells, to analyze the information from these 2 test wells about the water, production, the expected production level, the water quality at those 2 sites. Based on that information, then to design and then to drill the production well, and then to design and then build the wellhead facilities. In April of this year, the department went out with a request for proposal for expert and consultant support for the development and implementation of the project. And the city received 3 proposals. One from EKI, the consultant who supported the city with the development of our urban water management last year, having a high degree of understanding and knowledge about our water system. West Yost, who is supporting us right now, developing our water master plan, and RMC, the consultant who helped us with the development of the groundwater management plan, and also who is working with us right now for the sewer master plan. The selection team recommended EKI. The reason why they recommended EKI among 3 very strong consultant team was that EKI came to the table with some cost savings ideas, lowering the pressure level in the system and lowering the investment cost and also the ongoing maintenance and operation cost for the well. And also based on the strong team, what they are bringing to this project, and having on the team itself one of the best experts in well design in the region. Based on those reasons, is our recommendation to award this contract for a total of $606,000 to EKI, who will provide us with the following. They will design and support us during the development, design, and the implementation of the 2 test wells. Then they will make the interpretation of the information and the result of the test well, develop the documentation and the bid document for the production well. They are providing field support and construction support for the drilling of the production well, and they will design and develop the bid document for the wellhead facilities. In addition to these contract services, the city will need to go out for construction contract for drilling the 2 test well, and then a second contract for drilling the production well, and a third contract for the wellhead facility construction. The total cost estimate for this project is $3.2 million. All of those, including the design, step time, and the construction for this project. Based on our assessment, this investment would be returned in about 5 years. Also, to test the financial consequences of the policy alternatives for different level of ratio between purchased water and produced water by the city. Our financial consultant for the 10-year financial plan was retained to provide us with some financial assessment of those alternatives. This financial consultant, helped us with the 10-year financial plan, which was the base to set the rates back in the spring of this year. The study concluded that the cost to produce water in the city is lower than purchasing water, even with the cost of the investment for sustaining the production infrastructure, the wells itself. Reason why is to keep the overall cost of water for our residents as low as possible is our recommendation tonight to replace this well 15, and to make this investment for the long-term sustainability of our water production and our system. In our CIP, this project was estimated with the $3.2 million. A $40,000 already was spent on this project. Is still a available $930,000 appropriated available for this year, which, based on our expectation, will be enough for the work needed to be done this year. And as part of this next year's CIP budget appropriation, additional funding will be requested, as included already in our CIP project. With that, that would be my presentation, and all 3 of us will stand for any question that you might have.
Good. Any questions of staff? Michael?
Thank you. When we get these design requests, I always try to figure out what a reasonable estimate is. And one thing I try to look at is the design cost versus the construction cost and see if it's within a general percentage. And generally, I think most of public works projects come in right around 20% of construction, so that's kind of a guideline I can at least use to rationalize some of these numbers. In this case, I think it's around 30%. So to me, it was like, okay, well, this is kind of an expensive design. And initially, when I was reading this, I thought that it included some of the test wells, actually constructing the test wells, but then in your breakdown, you show that that's actually part of the $2 million request. And it looks like this project, the design project, will overlap with that $2 million project. And so the design includes some design portions that are actually part of that construction, or at least the timing. These things are going to overlap, and so maybe it's a little different in that perspective. But maybe you could just explain a little bit more on over the 2 years what we're getting for our $600,000, and what level of support we should expect. How many people will be on the team? What their involvement will be on a day-to-day basis. Just to try to help me rationalize the cost.
I had here a very detailed breakdown of the $606,000. This project is a well project, is more a interactive type of project than any other typical project that you have all of the information, and then you are using that information and you are designing the project, then you are building the project. Here you need additional information as part of the development of the project itself, that you really need additional information on production rate, the layer from here, you have higher production rate, water quality, and based on those additional information during the project development, then you are analyzing those additional data and you are using for the next phase implementation. And this contract includes all of the support what the city will need except the construction of the wellhead facility. Everything is that additional estimate is included in the total cost, but is not included in this $606,000. The size of the team will be defined. You have you have the general consultant who will provide the project management EKI, and you have 2 sub-consultants for this project. And how I indicated before, one of the key reasons why this consultant was recommended is the availability of one of the best well experts in the region who will support on as needed basis the development of the project. Also is a very strong civil design team who will provide the civil engineering design for the project. The $606,000 include obtaining all of the permits beside construction management, design support, and design services. These $606,000 also include project management support, obtaining all of the permits needed, analyzing the data in the field, including public outreach and support in our public outreach effort when and how much is needed.
Do you have any idea historically on when the initial well here at Commodore was constructed, more or less what we spent on design for that one.
I don't have the information, unfortunately, for the Commodore, but I know that Wing Wang was the project manager for the construction of well Tony.
He's been around
And
a
the
while.
cost for that well was around 2,200,000 was the cost of that well at was in 2003.
Yes. Well 20 near the Lions Field, that was constructed around 2003. And as I can recall, the total cost of the well is slightly over $2 million. And for the consultant costs, the initial contract was $200,000. And later during the wellhead facility design phase and treatment phase, we have to add another $100,000 into the contract. So the total, I would say, design cost, consulting cost is about $300,000.
Okay. So, given that figure, what is there anything particular about this particular area that we're considering drilling in, or some other factors that would really justify, or are we just talking about doing more, doing better? I mean, because that's pretty much half of what we're looking at right now.
I think our intent is to do it better. It's my understanding that the design and the implementation of well Tony had some challenges at that time, and it's our intent to prevent all of the challenges what that project, what the city faced during the implementation of that well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ken?
I was just whispering into the mayor's ear. I remember the development of the crossings, and that we did. One of the conditions was to carve out a little area for, for a future well. My question is along the lines of my colleague here, is that since Lions Field was the last well nearly 10 years ago, and I remember us sitting here and discussing the new type of well that was going to go into Lions Field that was different than what is at Cypress at City Park. Where has well design come now in 10 years? And obviously the construction is about the same, but now the consultant costs, the design costs, are a lot higher. I'm sure they know a lot more, and they're studying a lot more, and hopefully they'll last longer and produce longer. But can you tell us lay people what is the new and improved well design now?
This will be a very different well versus the wells designed before, and I will let Mark, who is so passionate about these wells, just to give him the opportunity to explain to you in the layman terms. Mark.
Your question was, what's the difference between the...
What I'd like to know is, since our residents are going to be footing the bill for this, and this is a big ticket item, $3 million, what is their assurances that this is a good investment, that this well is going to be state of the art in comparison to the one that it's replacing? And what was, how much better is it than what we installed in 2003?
It's going to be similar to what we installed, but this one's not going to be piecemeal together like it was before. It was designed just for the wellhead at that time, and wasn't designed for the filtration. So that's included in the design, and also the construction support is in there, which wasn't in the 2003 design. So there's a lot of added, everything's going to be done, I think, at a higher professional level than it was at Well 20. We had a lot of problems during construction because of the design. So I think you can get a lot better design on this one. So I looked at both, and this one's a lot better, the proposal.
I'd like to elaborate on that regarding the improvement of different types of well. Previous wells, the 15, 16, 17, 18, those wells were constructing using what they call a line shaft type of wells. And that means the motor and the pumps is at the bottom of the well, and a submersible pump with a cable going to the top. And with those wells, when the motor breaks down, you have to dismantle the entire column, one section at a time, to pull the motor up. And that's increased the maintenance cost, increased the time it takes to repair. Line fill was a different technology where it was called the turbine pump. And with line fill, the motor sits on the very top of the well. So if something were to break with the motor, you can dismantle it right there without taking the entire column pipe, which is about 600 feet, one section at a time to pull up the motor. So that was the advantage. And at that time, yes, line fill is a more advanced state-of-the-art because of also the SCADA control, which allow remote control monitoring of the equipment, a room to house a standby generator, a really large generator, soundproof building, treatment design, a green sand treatment to remove manganese and iron. So to answer your question, yes, line fill is a much more advanced well than 15, 16, 17, and 18. And I believe, if I'm correct, Mark, that this new well, the new 15 well, will be prototype under the well 20 line fill well design, which would also be an above ground turbine drive.
Yeah, it's called a vertical line shaft, and it's got separate bearings all the way down 600 feet. Well 20, and it's about the same depth. I think it's about 580, well 50, old well 15. So yeah, you can easily take that motor, its off-the-shelf motor, replace it with a brand new one, whereas the submersible is probably about $100,000 for a new one, opposed to, maybe 5 to 10 for a motor that sits on top. And like I also said, they're going to be designing for the green sands appropriately. We actually took the filters from 15, the old 15, and put them in well 20, and they're a little undersized. So we're going to make sure that that's all done properly this time. We had some issues last time. I think the design team is going to do an excellent job. That's why we selected them. So I don't know.
Thank you.
What else to add? Yeah.
To the chair, I'm just going to echo about it's already been talked about, and I think some answers have been given. I think Mark alluded to some additional items that are being included in this design that weren't in the prior Lions well. I have heard the same thing, so I appreciate the frankness and honesty that there were some learning curves, growing pains, we'll call them, with Lions well. And so I'm assuming if this is the best who's available and all of those good things that I've heard here tonight, then this should be able to be taken care of, and we shouldn't have those again, or see, or hear, or have contingency issues or change orders, since we've had those growing pains and learning experiences. Would that kind of be a fair assessment?
That is our expectation. And that's how was made the recommendation and selecting this team, that this team really will help the city to develop a well with top of the line, with maximum production level possible, and with a longer life cycle also than our prior wells. I would add one other advantage: having two test wells in the same this time, and collecting information for both of those sites. If the city will have the intent to develop in the future and any additional well, then the information already will be available for a additional site.
I'd just like to clarify, I heard the council member ask or suggest that the well construction could be done without contingency and potentially without change order. I would say that that is not what staff is suggesting in proposing that a thoughtful design process will, to the best of our knowledge and based on our learning from the experience we had with well 20 and using well 20 as a prototype, for a new and more efficient and better type of well construction, that we do anticipate a more efficient well design and development process. But I'd like to be clear that we do also anticipate presenting you a construction contract which will include a contingency, which will be expected to cover any necessary change orders that arise during the construction of that well.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm referring mostly to the design, but with the holiday season, one can hope.
All right. Anything else?
Through the chair,
Michael.
I had one last question. Is there an opportunity that we could look at using some sort of alternative energy associated with this well without dramatically impacting the construction cost, whether that be solar or wind or something that could be incorporated into this project?
One of the recommendation and the reason why this team was chosen, they already came with energy saving recommendation for this project. And also is a parallel effort for us to look at alternative energy savings and energy alternative for all of our sites. Will be our intent to make sure that that thinking will be incorporated in our design.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else? Any action by the council?
Through the chair, I will introduce the resolution for a vote.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell. Aye. Mayor Ruane.
Aye. And finally, item 10F, receive an oral report from the city clerk on attendance at new law election seminar in San Jose. Carol.
Mayor and Council, a couple of weeks ago, I attended the new elections, the city clerk's new law and election seminar. This year, I actually served on the planning committee to plan the event, and there were a lot of subjects that were presented there. The first thing I'd like to share with you, there was really a lot of new faces. In fact, more than half of the 350 people in attendance were new. And I head up the Sunshine Hospitality Committee for the city clerks. And last year I sent out over 100 cards, and most of them were for retirement. Our first session dealt with transparency. And in your recent issue of Western City, they have an article on tools for enhancing transparency. And the importance of transparency is it makes government operations clearly visible to residents and is essential to their ability to understand and participate in the decision-making processes that affects them. We spent a half a day on that. We discussed the Brown Act and shared best practices. A group from San Mateo that included Banja Rose, who worked for us for a little while, gave us an overview of project management and exploration of approaches to creating effective business cases needed for project funding. The first half of our second day dealt with elections and new law updates presented by this really neat guest speaker who is the Registrar of Voters in Orange County. And every year he does a skit before he does his long, giving us all the law changes that have occurred. It's long, but he makes it fun before it starts. We were introduced to the FPPC through a lunchtime presentation by Chair Ann Rebell, who was appointed by Governor Brown last year. She said she was trying to make rules fair, clearer, and easier to comply with, and to focus on the worst offenders rather than on those who make minor mistakes. She was very dynamic and likable, and it was good because that was lunch hour. Then we got to listen for 3 hours to all the changes through the FPPC issues, conflicts of interest, gift regulations, the intricacies of successor agencies, and oversight boards. And the last day was just a presentation by a lady who was a motivational speaker. So it was good, and I thank you. I learned a lot.
Good. Any questions for our city clerk? All right, thank you, Carol. Item number 11, we had 11 already. Item number 12, comments from council members. Nothing special. Item 13, closed session. We began a closed session. We're going to continue it right after this meeting. Item number 14, adjournment. Prior to adjournment, I would like to close this meeting in the memory of a very good friend of all of ours, and not just in San Bruno, but the entire of San Mateo County. That would be former Supervisor Mike Nevin, who was also former mayor of Daly City. Mike was a real mover and shaker, but a real human being, and we're all going to miss him very, very much. So please join me in a moment of silence. I thank you. And this next regular council meeting will be held right here, January 9, 2013, and we would like to wish, pardon?
It's the 8th.
Oh, it's the 8th.
I made a boo-boo. It's the 8th.
Must have been. I had a draft copy. I guess it probably happened when you were in San Jose, but that's all right. We would like to wish all of the members of the council and staff, as well as all of the people in San Bruno, a very happy and safe holiday, and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.